Once you've installed the WNYCMA record keeping system, a shortcut will appear on your start menu as WNYCMARK. It will also appear in your programs menu as WNYCMARK, and I just selected to open it from there. Your login and username will both be delivered to you from the email that you sent to WNYCMA office. Let's wait a minute as it logs in. When this screen appears, you'll be ready to go. This is your navigation page. It brings you through the entire program and lets you access different parts of it. One of the most important goals that we have with this program is that it will allow you to access your recommendations without having to talk to your consultant about them. To get to some of your recommendations, you can go to planting records and you'll see your crop history report. If you go to manure application records, you can view your manure recommendations. Fertilizer recommendations include your fertilizer recommendations. And if you go to other reports, you'll be able to see things like your soil test history and field key. Let's view our field key. I click the View Field Key button, and I enter the crop year. The crop year advances following corn harvest. So I want to see the coming crop year's information, so I'm going to enter 2013. And hit enter. This comes in at a very small font size. To increase that, I can use the magnification tool, which is already selected. I can also use that right up here as the zoom tool and select which level I want it at. This is a multiple page report for many farms. To select different pages, you can use the next page button. You can use the sidebar to scroll through your pages, and if you need to print, you can use the print button on the side. I'm going to close this report by hitting Close Print Preview, or I can close it by clicking the X over here. I'm going to go back to the navigation page, and now we're going to talk about entering records. First records, we're going to talk about entering your planting records. If you're keeping your planting records, you probably want to enter your varieties to keep track of them. So I'm going to select that first. I'm going to click on Enter Varieties, and now I can enter information about them. A note about how this form is structured. The buttons on the top correspond to the spreadsheet on the bottom. If I select a value in that spreadsheet, all of the fields on top are now connected to the rows in that spreadsheet. So company and company correspond, etc. Now if I go up the next row to the mycogen, that does as well. If I want to enter a new value, I click in the row that has a star next to it and start typing. I'm going to call this variety test 2. And I'm just going to write a bunch of junk about it. Traits, whatever. Retired. Retired controls whether or not this shows up in your pull-down menu. You'll see what I mean in just a moment. Now I'm going to close the Varieties tab. Note that when I close this, all of the information I have entered will automatically save to our server. Now I'm going to enter planting records. I enter my crop year. And I see a form somewhat similar to what I looked at before, but different. First off, there's a big gap in the middle. That's where you're going to be entering your records. The values in the form on top, again, correspond to the spreadsheet on bottom. When I select different rows on bottom, the rows on top change. On the sidebar, you have your crop history. If I want to enter some planting information, I select my field on the bottom, and I select my crop out of the pull-down menu. We're going to plant some corn here. We're going to select a variety from my list. Now, any varieties that I have clicked the retired button will no longer appear in this list. I'm going to select the planting date. I'm going to plant very early here on February 19th. Population comments are fairly self-explanatory. A little bit more information about how to get around here. The spreadsheet on the bottom can be sorted and filtered in numerous ways. To do that, click on the little arrow next to the column header. That'll bring up a menu. This gives us the option of sorting our information by various methods. It also gives us the option of filtering our information by various methods. So I'm going to decide to look at only the fields on map 6. So I can either use the handy menu here to unselect everything and then click on 6, or I can use the number filters dialog and highlight number filters equals 6. Now I have the 3 fields that are on map 6. If I want to go back, I can click this filtered button and see all of my fields again. If I want to enter next year's planting, I just go back to my field 109 and I type in the next row below it. The new crop, the new variety, the new planting date, etc. If I decide to delete one of these varieties, say I entered something wrong, this field right now has both corn and alfalfa being planted the same date, I click on the sidebar right next to my record and I use the delete button on my keyboard. The computer will warn me that I'm about to delete something and I have a chance to confirm or deny that action. Now I'm going to close the planting menu. And we'll go back to the main navigation page. Manure application records functions very much like planting records, as does harvest records. So let's do a manure application record. I select manure applications records from the navigation page, and now I enter a spreader. You need to have a spreader to apply manure in this program. All of the manure is generated by how many loads that you enter from a given spreader. We're going to enter a new spreader here. Again, the values on top correspond to the selected row on bottom. I'm going to pick the new row and call this one test spreader 2. I need to tell it whether it's going to be liquid or solid. We're going to spread some liquid manure and it's going to be a 7,000 gallon spreader. Okay, that's entered. And we're going to close spreaders and take a look at sources. Manure sources are generated by WNYCMA. If you need more sources added to your list, please contact your crop consultant and they will be very happy to add them. Now let's enter your actual records. Enter manure application records. Again, we need to enter the crop year. We're going to be entering our manure for the crop year 2013, so 2013. Hit OK, and select manure rec type, spring or fall. At WNYCMA, we generate 2 sets of recommendations a year. Fall is the maximum amount you're allowed to put on that field that year. Spring is generally how much we want you to put on for crop growth, minus your manure applied up to the date that we made your recommendation. So let's look at fall. And here we are. Notice that the manure application screen looks pretty similar to the planting screen. I'm going to make an application for field TOS1 here. I'm going to select TOS1 at the bottom, and I'm going to select the source I want to draw it from, the main lagoon, and the spreader that I spread with, test spreader 2. Number of loads. Well, we're going to just spread a small amount of manure. I'm going to spread 5 loads. And we're spreading that today. And whoops, I guess we're not spreading that today. And are we incorporating? Probably not. The ground was frozen hard as a rock that day. Weather conditions, cold. Crop year, 2013. Will pop in automatically. And comments if I have anything else I need to say. Notice that the manure applied is calculated automatically. Now I go down to my next field to enter a record there, and if I go back to TOTS line 1, you'll notice that the applied gallon section now has a number in it. If I add a large amount of manure, So instead of 5 loads, we're going to do 45 loads. And I ask that information to refresh. Notice that I'm nearly at the recommended cap for manure on this field per acre. So that shows up as yellow. If I apply a little bit more manure and I go over the recommended amount, it shows up in red and tells me that I'm not allowed to put more manure on this field. You can enter as many applications as you want per field in this window, as many crop years as you want. This list will continue to grow as you use the system more. And let's close manure application. Now we have different ways to look at this information. First off, we can view our recommendations directly from the WNYCMA office. We've already seen those, so let's look at some of our other reports. The manure application log is targeted at the grower, is targeted at the DEC. The manure application log shows every single day that manure has been applied to a given field and all of the weather conditions and other important information. The manure application totals is targeted more at the grower. That shows how much manure, the sum of all manure that's been applied to each field instead of the daily log of what went out. Let's close and go back to our main navigation page. Next up, let's look at our lime application records. Our lime, fertilizer, and chemical records are structured somewhat differently than the manure, planting, and harvest records. They're set into 2 groups, the uncompleted jobs and the completed jobs. When a job is completed, it moves from the uncompleted list to the completed list. Let's see what I mean. In this form, notice that there are things that you can interact with at the top of the form. In general, throughout the program, form columns that are in gray are columns you cannot interact with. I cannot type into this column. Form columns that are clear, I can. So let's pick a field. 401B has 2 tons, 401B has lime recommended to it. We are going to say that it's been applied. And the next time we go into this list, it won't appear any longer. We can put in the rate of lime that we applied, we can put in the units that we used to measure it, the date, and the comments. Now, when I close this form, it appears on my completed lime jobs list. There we are. If I want to send this back to uncompleted, I uncheck it. Let's go back to the main page. Many of you are CAFOs, and as such have a large number of records that need to be kept for the DEC. We wanted to give you an option to enter those records here, or in any other way that works for you. The important thing is that you're keeping these records and keeping your CAFO permit in good standing. It's not as where you keep them is not as important as that you keep them and that they're handy. But let's look at rainfall records. Enter rainfall records. Right now we have one record entered. To enter a second, we click to the blank record. We enter an amount, a date, and a comment if we feel like it. Comments aren't necessary. And now we can close. Another thing that we can enter are storage levels. Oops, I'm sorry, I'm clicking the report. Of course, there are no storage records in here because this is a brand new system for this farm. Sorry, let's go to enter the weekly storage level records instead of viewing the report. Here, I can pick my storage and say how full it is. And the date that I took my record. Now that'll appear on the report that I accidentally opened prior to this. Enter the starting date, that is the date that you want the report to start at, and the final date that you want the report to show. And there we are. Okay, well that concludes our short demo of the Western New York record keeping system. Thank you for watching the video. If you have any further questions, please send an email to office@wnycma.com or call the Warsaw office at 585-786-5831. Thank you very much.